you get started in broadcasting?
Man, I got started in broadcasting because when I was young, I was a singer, so I was a performer, and I was a hockey player. So I was an athlete and I was a performer. And in 8th grade, Joe, I went to Channel 8 in Cleveland, and it was the local act for the Jerry Lewis Telethon. And our little group from North Olmsted High School, we got to sing like 3 or 4 songs. So I sang at Channel 8. It was the local cut-in for the Jerry Lewis Telethon, the Labor Day Telethon. And after we did that, first of all, that was pretty cool. But after we did that, we watched them do the 11 o'clock news. And I'll never forget the experience of watching this dude read some teleprompter, doing sports, and I'm like, that's what I'm gonna do. So I went on, I played college hockey, I played as high of a level as I could, and then I finally said, you know what, I'm gonna go do this TV thing. Got an internship at the radio station my freshman year at Miami of Ohio, but I was fortunate. In 8th grade, I knew what I wanted to do for a living.
Then there was the hockey broadcasting portion of your career. What was that like?
It was the best. It was the best. And to make my, hockey play-by-play debut in the NHL on ESPN2, it's like I kind of apologize for all those dudes who worked in the minors all those years. That said, I did a lot of small conference basketball, a lot of high school sports. I was in the Mid-Continent Conference cities. I was in a lot of little places in the middle of nowhere doing sports. So I cut my teeth with basketball and other sports. That was my minor league hockey. My first ever game was San Jose and Anaheim at the Shark Tank, and my partner was Bill Clement. Bill Clement was my hero. I'd watched Billy for years. I'm a Flyers fan. Billy was not only one of my favorite players, he was on those teams with my favorite player, Bobby Clark, but as a broadcaster, he truly, and still is, my mentor, my hero, and that night on the Deuce, he was my broadcast partner.
How did you deal with it mentally, though, when you had to step up there and realize, look at the big platform that I'll be broadcasting on, look who's sitting next to me, and forget that you're not that kid in grade 8. That you're Mike Goldberg, and ready, 3, 2, 1.
Do my thing. I'm supposed to be here. They hired me for a reason, and stay out of the way. Know your role. Understand that, you know what? I got Madden standing next to me right here. You know what? I've got Harry Neal standing next to me. You know what? They do it so well. And for so many years, Grapes has been a star. But why is he a star? Because Ron McClain sets the table better than anyone in our business. And I know you and I agree on that. That was my thing. Call the game the way I've called it before. I called a ton of college hockey. And just do your thing. Don't force it. Just let it happen. And let Billy be the star. Because Billy was the star. It's the same as it is today with Joe. Years later, it's the same as I understand my role sitting next to Joe Rogan. And then a couple of games in, I go to the Chicago locker room for a morning skate, and JR pulls me aside, and he knew me because I was in Chicago covering the Bulls, and I worked at Sports Channel. And he goes, man, I watched you the other night with Panger. I said, well, thanks, Jeremy. He goes, dude, you're a natural. Okay, now I got Jeremy Roenick telling me I'm pretty good at this. Then things started to roll a little bit. I got a little bit of confidence.
So you go from ice hockey,
yeah,
and the zaniness that can be ice hockey. There's fights in hockey, and
of course,
good old Canadian boy loves to see fights on the ice. We understand why mixed martial arts are so big in Canada. Fighting's in our DNA.
Absolutely.
All of a sudden, Mike Goldberg is calling UFC fights.
Yep.
Where did that transition come from?
From hockey. Totally, 100% from hockey, because one of my producers was Bruce Connell, and he's still my producer today. And Bruce had been on the ESPN crew for years. He had done so many games on hockey. Bruce's father, may he rest in peace, actually came up with the concept of Peter Puck for NBC years ago, and he's in the Television Hall of Fame. So you're talking about a hockey family. So Brucey was one of the many producers that I worked with. Bruce, most of the time, had Tom Mees, the late Tom Mees, and Darren Pang, but we would switch around during the regular season. Bruce liked my work, and Bruce's family company, Concom, had the rights to the broadcast of the UFC through SEG. You remember the old SEG days? We've talked about it. Fighting for a Generation, what a great show. So long story short, I didn't get renewed in Detroit after a year with the Red Wings, 1997 when we won the Cup. I was kind of getting back on my feet. Bruce calls, he goes, Goldie, I got a gig for you. It's in Japan. They'll pay you X amount of dollars. You got to take a jiu-jitsu class. Send a tape to David Isaacs as SEG. All I heard was Japan and gig and the number, and I was in. And there you have it. That was it. Ultimate Japan, December of 1997. But it was the hockey connection, Joe. And we still have a lot of hockey guys in our crew that he knew that my enthusiasm, the way that I was excitable for a broadcast, that it would translate well to MMA.
Do you remember the very first fight you called for the UFC and what was going through your mind?
Yeah, how am I going to get my notes that I faxed, because back then it was a fax modem, in English? Because if I faxed them to the front desk at the Shin Yokohama Prince Hotel, then it was going to be in Japanese, and that wasn't going to be helpful at all. So I sent them all the way back to Connecticut, and Bruce's mom, who of course they used the first names because they were in the business together, to Till, and she faxed it all the way back to Japan so I'd have my notes. My biggest thing is that I was really lucky. When I walked in, I met Elaine McCarthy, John's wife. And at that point, Elaine was the event coordinator. She also understood the Gracies because John, of course, had trained with Hoist, and so she kind of told me, like, Gracie's like Smith, and the little guy gets on his back, and now I got John, and of course the late Jeff Blatnick, the Olympic gold medalist. I'm in some ballroom, and John gets on his back, opens his legs, and says, "Jump in." I'm a hockey player, man. I'm like, do what? Like, wait a second, what, jump? So they showed me guard, half guard, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. To this day, you'll enjoy this. Whenever I see somebody get a choke around the chin and Joe goes, "It's not under the neck, they won't tap." I had John McCarthy do that to me. I'm like, tap, 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 tap. So I was very fortunate to have them start to teach me the sport, and I got the storylines down. And once again, even though I knew a lot about hockey going into working with Billy, Jeff Blatnick was the man. So throw it up, tee up your partner. And I could tell a story. And I do remember the first fight night, but the biggest moment of that night, two big moments that night. First of all, Frank Shamrock's UFC debut. First time he'd ever fought, coming out of the shadows of Big Brother, the world's most dangerous man. He went against Kevin Jackson, an Olympic gold medalist, exactly. Armbar in about 18 or 19 seconds, and Randy Couture defeated Maurice Smith to become the UFC heavyweight champion.
And that was your first UFC?
That was my first one, and my 100th was UFC 91. I know it sounds weird with numbers, but Spike shows. UFC 91, Brock Lesnar and Randy Couture was my 100th UFC.
Wow. What is a usual work week like for Mike Goldberg?
Crazy. Crazy, crazy. It's a work 2 weeks now for each show. It truly is. Between updating the bios, Joe, and I don't care if I've seen GSP fight 24 times. He's doing something different this time. If they're not, then they're not evolving. So they're always doing something different. They're always bringing somebody else in new. They're always bringing a different sparring partner, setting it up. So it's studying the fighters. It's reading the articles. It's talking to the trainers, trying to talk to the fighters, do all that homework. Then the other part of it is the pay-per-view, and there's so many moving parts, as you know, in our show. It's getting the sponsorship stuff right. It's getting the how are we going to tease 172? Are we going to come out and break down the welterweight rankings? If we are, then I need to know a little something. Like, I know Rory's coming off a good win, but I need a little more love than that on Rory. So I put together my cards and the different scenarios in that regard as well. So it's a crazy time. Plus, there's a ton of stuff to voice, as you know. On your show, you're voicing all the time. So I'm voicing combo features 3 weeks in advance so they can get the editing process underway.
When you do your voiceovers, as an example, do you have a little setup at home?
Yep. Yeah. For years, I had a studio, and then finally we got to the point. Mike Sack, who's been with us forever, I've spent more time with Mike Sack than I have my own wife. I mean, we've done that much audio together, right? Mike's finally like, "Goldie, I can get Pro Tools and put a headset in, like, it'll sound fine, as you know, it's great." So we had a great studio at home in Phoenix, and still when we have to do bigger projects, we'll use that, but it's perfect. Even in a situation like being in Dallas, where 10 minutes from the arena, but I don't need to come over. If we've got to change a name, bang it out, send it over on Pro Tools, and we're good to go. So it's good to have the studio set up, travel with me now.
How's Mike Goldberg, the family life, the family man, and all that jazz?
You know what? Every day's an adventure. But I'll tell you what, my daughter was just on an episode of Nickelodeon's Sam and Cat. She had a speaking part. It was the bloopers episode. The creator of the show, Dan Schneider, absolutely adores her. She's 16. I know I'm dad, but she's got it. She's got the it factor. She's got the drive. I'm really proud of her. In fact, actually the episode aired the same night as Anderson Silva had his second fight with Chris Weidman when Anderson broke his leg. So I'm calling the fights. I'm jazzed up, but I'm also like, there's an excitement to me that night, Joe, because I wanted to get up to my sling box and see my daughter on TV, and yeah, I mean, bald like a baby. And my little guy's a hockey player. He's 13 years old. He's a first-year Bantam. Sees the ice very, very well. Just got invited to a couple prospect camps. Most importantly, he just loves the game. And he's buddies with Joe Thornton to the point where him and Jumbo bet on the fight, Anderson and Chris. And so Joe took Anderson and Cole took Chris. So I text Jumbo. I go, Jumbo, you know that $20? He doesn't have any money. I'm paying you. He goes, ha, ha, ha. And then the victory came for Chris. And I text Jumbo. I go, Joe, you owe me $20. And he goes, and I quote, Cole already texted me. I go, God love him. That's a testimony also, as every Canadian knows, to what a class act Joe Thornton is. He may be the nicest guy in hockey history.
Is San Jose your team right now?
It is indeed, absolutely 100%. I don't mind that they didn't make any moves at the deadline. Obviously, what happened after the Olympics was Logan Couture got healthy, Rafi came in, Desi's still playing well. They had the depth, and there was talk about maybe moving Dan Boyle. In a year where you might be there finally, you don't move your power play quarterback. I don't care what his contract situation is, because you're not going to get a Dan Boyle power play quarterback back for anybody at this point at the deadline. Do I hope that Danny's there for a long time? Absolutely. Good Miami of Ohio guy, came to the UFC in San Jose, love the way he plays the game. They re-upped Jumbo, they re-upped Marlowe, and they got a goaltender who's won a Stanley Cup before, and a kid in Stalock, 10 for 10 in a recent shootout. So, it's tough in the West. I mean, St. Louis upgraded, as you know, upgraded big time, but I'm liking how San Jose is playing right now.
I'd love to talk more hockey. I got my theories, but it is what it is. Yeah, the West is the West.
The West is the West, yeah.
Through Boston and
yeah, yep.
Of the thousands and thousands of fights that you called, is there one that you recall that was just the best one of all? When you just called it from opening bell to the end or finish or decision, where you're like, wow, that was fun.
Diego Sanchez, Gilbert Melendez. Seriously, it started at an 8 and then went to an 18. They just bit down on the mouthpiece. It was reminiscent for 2.5 rounds of what we saw in the third round of Forrest and Stefan back at the Ultimate Fighter. And of course, because they were so successful and both had been former champions, we always talk about Hendo and Shogun. That was a great fight. At the end, though, you had two guys that were gassed out. Still a great fight, though. But the pace that Diego and Gilbert kept, and the way they fought, and the bloodier he got, the better he got, it's insanity. It's absolute insanity. And another one which was cool was when Chuck and Vanderlei finally met. Because we'd all waited, fans like yourself, we'd all waited so long, and we're just like, please live up to the hype. And it did live up to the hype. So I'll never forget that one. And I'll never forget the head kick of Gonzaga on Krokop. Not like the big fight like you're talking about, but you want to talk about a moment where Joe and I looked at each other and went, well, that was one of them. And so was Anderson getting knocked out by Chris Weidman.
That moment there, that's a moment stuck in time.
Yeah.
Because I remember the pre-roar from the crowd was the gasp of silence.
Yeah.
And I wasn't able to hear you and Joe because I had to go home obviously to watch it online. But walk me through that moment when Chris does this and then does that and then the head wobble and down he goes.
It was surreal. Time truly, Joe, it stood still. First of all, it was like, wow, this just didn't happen. And then I just went, it's all over. Chris Weidman is the new UFC middleweight champion. And that's it, exactly. I went, what? And then I didn't say anything. Which in broadcasting, as you and I know, let it breathe. Big moments, shut up, let it breathe. So I went back to that. Also, what was there to be said? What could I say to add to that moment? Nothing. I was just watching a great interview with Bob Costas and Ken Dryden, and he was talking about how at the end of the game in 1980, do you believe in miracles? Yes. And then Ken came about 3 seconds later and he goes, unbelievable. And his kids and everybody make fun of him. He's like, Dad, that's all you could come up with is unbelievable? So just seeing that kind of made me think of the Anderson thing. But there was that shot. They had a cutaway of Joe and I sitting there, and I truly was like, this, and Joe was standing up in disbelief. I was in shock. Time truly stood still.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That was. Speaking of Joe.
I had to remember to say it's all over. I mean, because it was.
Speaking of Joe, what's the relationship like with a guy of that nature who's so intelligent, who's got his brain working in so many different directions? If you come and do color for the UFC, and we know what it's like in front of the camera.
Right.
How are you guys outside of the octagon, as an example?
We've always been great, and that's one thing we've talked about, on numerous occasions, is that the true, genuine friendship and respect that we have for each other is why our chemistry is so good. I mean, there's guys on TV, really good guys, and you know a few and I know a few, that fake it, that don't even talk to each other and call 82 games a year and do a really good job of it. That's not the case with Joe and I. There's a mutual respect, there's a caring for his family, there's a caring for my family, what's going on in our personal lives. We're friends and we respect each other. And I know that when it gets down to the ground, it's kinetic chess to him, man, and I'm like, get out of the way. Get out of the way, because that's his baby, that's his passion. It's just like a replay with John Madden, Summerall's not going to interrupt him, so do your thing. And it's a little different because we both kind of call play-by-play, we both do a little color, but it's just unique the way that our sport is. It's not like in hockey, puck is moving, I talk, puck stops, you talk. In football, puck, ball and play, I talk. Replay, you talk. Our sport's a little bit different. It's more hybrid with the way we call it, but we've always gotten along, and people have always talked about our chemistry. It's sincere, and it's because we're friends.
Of course, you listen to some of these forum talkers, which I mean, haters I can laugh at. I don't care about that. But you've got a connection to martial arts.
Yes.
Whether it's Telegrati or more. Talk about what it's like for you to train, and sometimes in the middle of training it's like, I gotta remember this.
Absolutely.
And I want someone to do this properly, sort of thing. Talk about your training in mixed martial arts as an example.
Well, the biggest thing is the sport continued to grow. I had to evolve, just like everybody else. And Joe, at first it's like yourself, I mean, I'm a great storyteller, you're a great storyteller, I can be enthusiastic, I can see a right hand, a left hand, I could call the basics, but as it exploded and as people became more educated, I'm like, you know what, if this is gonna be my baby, if I'm not gonna, like the NHL I could call, I played hockey since I was 6 years old. If this is gonna be my baby, then I need to get into it and I need to get it right. And so I trained some boxing in Las Vegas, and then I got to meet Mark Delagrati, started my relationship with my crew, Mark Delagrati, to the point where I've been at his home in Boston for 2 weeks at a time on numerous occasions, 3 times a day at Sit-Yo-Tum. And we just broke it down. It was 1-1-2, it was the elbows, it was what was the difference, why the knee there, why up here, why over here, teep. I remember I started saying teep, and Joe's a Taekwondo guy, so he's like front kick. So I'm like, teep, and people are like, what's a teep? Teep. Well, teep is foot jab. That's what it means in Thai. It's a foot jab. That's a teep. It's an offensive move. And so I learned it. I embraced it. I started to hit pads. I remember one time I was cracking the pads and Rampage goes, man, Goldie, I don't ever want you to kick me. And I'm thinking, man, Rampage, I don't ever want you to slam me. And I don't want to fight you anyway. But it really was a mentoring that Mark still continues to give me. And he's, when you talk about my improvement of the knowledge of the game, and especially of Muay Thai and the striking game and the idiosyncrasies that go with that and positioning, setting things up, that's Mark. Mark was my teacher. Mark was my mentor. And I went in there and I got wrapped and I got punched and I got kicked and I checked kicks and I threw kicks and I was tired and I puked and I did it all. And I embraced it. You know what though? I loved every minute of it. It was fun because I'm a hockey player, so I'm an athlete. So like all of a sudden I'm hitting things and he's like, yeah, Goldie, yeah, Goldie, right, yeah, nice. And it was an absolute blast. And I continue to do it. I continue to try to learn and evolve. And I talk to different Muay Thai guys. Duke Rufus is another guy I spent a lot of time with. And Duke broke down things in a little different way because everybody has a little different way to look at it. Duke is more of a kickboxer, where he's the Dutch way, he's more of a Dutch kickboxer, where if you look at Mark obviously competed in Thailand. Sit-Yo-Tum came from Thailand. I want to go to Thailand. I want to have that experience. So that was a real key, something that Dana and them talked about, bring it up, bring your game up. And I'm like, I would love to. So I owe him a lot.
You've been the voice, along with Joe, of a sport that has evolved in front of all of our eyes.
Right.
And it continues to evolve. When you hear Joe Rogan say, I don't know what that is, and I'm going to go learn it as soon as we're done the show. So you two guys have been there watching the athlete evolve in front of our eyes.
Yep.
What is it like from your perspective?
Well, the guy that comes to mind first when you speak of the changing of the guard and how the game is different than it used to be, the kid that comes to mind is Rory McDonald. Absolutely 100%. Because he's the first guy we talked about like that. Because at 16 years old, living in Kelowna, British Columbia, he quit all other sports. And I'm pretty sure he was a darn good football player and a pretty good hockey player or whatever he was doing, Joe, because he's an athlete. Obviously, he's an athlete. Jonathan Chainberg talks all the time about him being one of the greatest athletes he's ever trained. And Jonathan trains guys in every sport. Obviously, he's done it for a long time. Rory was that kid who did everything. He wasn't a wrestler. He wasn't a kickboxer. He wasn't a jiu-jitsu practitioner. He was a mixed martial artist at 16 years old when he walked in to train every day. And by 19, he was moving to Montreal to become the best in the world. And now we've seen others like that come upon us, these young kids, the Jimmy Heddeses of the world and many others. But the guy that really, I believe, was the first to be a mixed martial artist from day one was Rory McDonald. And he had great success early. He was 7 seconds away from beating Carlos Condon in Vancouver. Carlos just got angry and mean and got it stopped with 7 seconds. But as dominant as that round was, it was still the first 2 rounds going to Rory. Rory would have beaten Carlos Condon back then at that age. He's the true pioneer of the next generation, and now we're seeing kids go in at 9 years old, at 10 years old. I see it at all my buddies' gyms all around, and they're training MMA. What do? You wrestle? No. What do? You box? No. Muay Thai? No. What do you do? I do all of them, sir. There you go, mixed martial artist. And that's going to be the biggest change. And we're going to see the effects of that over the next many years. Even Chris Weidman is a wrestler still, but he's learned to strike, and his sub game came very quickly to him and somewhat easily to him and naturally, but he's still a collegiate wrestler. Rory McDonald is the MMA guy. So the next generation of fighters, wow, going to be fun to watch.
The sport and the business has changed dramatically from the genesis of the SEG era to where it is right now. I mean, you can go so many ways with this, from the Chael Sonnens of the world, understanding the fight promotion game, to guys that just won't do it. The business, the sport has changed so much. What do you think is some of the differences that you never saw coming or you're happy have arrived?
Okay, when I first came to Las Vegas, SEG had sold the company to Zuffa. And Frank and Lorenzo and Dana and a couple others had brought a small handful of us SEG guys, Bruce Connell, obviously, at our time, Jay Mullen, I believe, our director, James Wormy. They brought Blatnick. They brought a bunch of us to Vegas to say hello to the new bosses. Who knew what the future would be, who would get cut, who would survive, who would they like, who would they not like. But we sat there and we talked, and we had this vision, and all of a sudden I'm like, these guys are big casino guys. Like, this is like cool, because for the last 2 years, seriously, every UFC, Bruce and I would say, we got to grab a beer tonight after the show because this might be the last show. I mean, and if you saw, again, Fighting for a Generation, Bob Meyerowitz, he kept it on life support. Thank goodness, or we wouldn't be here today. I asked Lorenzo this. I said, Lorenzo, will the UFC ever be on a billboard in Las Vegas? And he's like, yes, it will be. And that was good to me at the time. Seriously, that was good for me, Joe. I'm like, really? That's crazy. And now we're on billboards in Times Square and all over the place. No one could have imagined the way that this would have taken off, but Dana was right. The fighting's in our DNA. I'm watching this Ken Dryden thing the other day. They're talking about the 74 series. They're talking about Canadians. Well, fighting in hockey. Fighting's in our DNA. Well, yeah, Dana's right. Where are you going to go? You got Michael Jordan shooting free throws on one corner, Tiger Woods hitting balls on the other, Wayne Gretzky going shelf over here, and you got a fight there. Everybody's going to be right there at the fight. When the fight's over, if they're Canadian, they'll go see Gretz. If they're American, they'll go see Jordan. And if they're a golfer, they'll go see Tiger. But I could have never imagined. But that's all I thought at that point. And then this PR marketing machine went into shape. But keep in mind, we were 40 million in the hole. All of a sudden, Lorenzo's about to pull the plug. All right, let's throw 10 more million into this Ultimate Fighter Season 1. And it worked. Thank goodness it worked. And thank you, Forrest Griffin and Stephen Bonner. But truly, thank you to everyone on the cast of that first season, because we had great personalities and great storylines.
Have you sat back for a moment and done the math of what's going to happen over the next 4 to 5 years Ultimate Fighter China, Ultimate Fighter India, tough Mexico, tough Canada, tough Australia, UFC in prime time in global markets. What this truly will become.
It's crazy. I mean, remember Lorenzo said years ago, talking about getting into Asia. And I forget, watching the Olympics, what is it, billions of people obviously in China or whatever, right? And the old joke is, there's billions of people in China who don't care. Well, you know what? Now they do. They care about MMA and they care about the UFC. That's Lorenzo Fertitta right there. That's his baby. Global dominance. He's talked about that, as you know, Joe, for years. And when he came over and he said, you know what, Frank, casinos are good. I'm going to go play UFC with Dana and we're going to make this thing the biggest thing in the world. You knew you were in the right hands right then. You knew it was going to get done. And now it's starting to hit. And again, everybody wants to fight. But the population and the areas and the places we can hit. And Mexico City, I mean, are you kidding me? Put King Velasquez in a soccer stadium in Mexico City? Really? How about Gilbert Melendez, Diego Sanchez 2 as the co-main event? That wouldn't be bad either, would it? It's unbelievable. But it doesn't surprise me because of the way that it's gone and because of the men who lead us. The men who lead us are brilliant men. Lorenzo Fertitta is brilliant at what he does. Dana White has been able to be this figure and this voice, and he's brash at times and he's truthful at times and he's mad, but he is a personality. But people gravitate to the true passion that Dana has. Dana is the biggest fan that we have of the Ultimate Fighting Championship. That's pretty cool. I don't know if that can be said about Gary Bettman and some others, and no disrespect to those others, but you can truly say that the biggest fan of the Ultimate Fighting Championship is Dana White.
What's your relationship like with Dana?
It's great. You know what? I've learned over the years with Dana what he is trying to push, and so I'm understanding from a promotional point of view, what are the storylines that we want to sell? What are the storylines for today? What are the storylines that we might want to tell from before? And most importantly, what are we setting up potentially in the future? Be it Gustafsson with his win in England the other day, and now let's see what Johnny does with Glover, and will they fight again? And Alex was tough, and will it go back to Toronto? And that's where my relationship with Dana has been wonderful. I understand the topics that he wants to hit, and I try to hit those topics in the right way. So Joe and I talk about it, and if there's certain things that he wants to push or not want to push, he'll let us know. But for the most part, he lets us do our thing, and we respect it. And I've worked for him so long. Again, I understand what the UFC machine is all about.
With that being said, how long do you think you'll be doing this for?
Oh man, I hope a while. I'm having fun still. I feel young. My voice is good. I'm still working with Joe. I mean, it's crazy popular right now. I wouldn't want it to end anytime soon. I'll be 50 years old this year, but I don't feel it though. Exactly. It's funny because in the bathroom at our hockey rink at home, there's this 50 and over skate, and I see the sign for it all the time, and I'm like, I can't do that. Like, I'm not ready for that yet. I feel great. I feel energized by this sport. I feel energized by the fans. I'm energized by my relationship with Joe. I won't keep on keeping on, man. What else am I going to do? Play men's league? I'm playing men's league a couple nights a week now. I'm good.